Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Today we're looking at a first submission by Carolyn of the horse Biggie. Biggie's a horse that she doesn't really know everything about his history. He's supposedly a half Lusitano crossed with a Morgan. Um, he was extremely upside down when she got this horse, as he still is, and she's just in the process of just beginning this process of turning him around. So he's about 10 years old, and he's just beginning in this process. We had seen a previous video of him ridden a little bit, and it was just decided that he just needed to go back and start all over again with this horse because he was just too weak to carry a rider. So now she's gone back to the beginning here, which is what we need to do, and get him stretching, and already we're seeing a huge difference. I mean, the difference in the way you have him moving here is just vastly different than what I saw in the riding video. So this horse has a long way to go. Very typical horse who's been upside down his whole life, but that doesn't mean he can't turn around, and he will. And once again, the age, she's, as far as I'm concerned, a fairly young horse at 10 years old. So you should have lots of years left. We have another one that's kind of a similar horse. That's some kind of Morgan that belongs to Cody Cheek here. And he was quite upside down, but she brought him around. Now she has a new horse though, but she's still working with him. And it's amazing, his back was almost completely sway back when she started again. And once again, out about a year of work, he began to flatten out the back and looked really good. So you know that you're basically starting with a horse, that's sort of below zero, as I like to say, in the sense that he's on his way to being damaged. So you've got, a little bit of extra time here when you train a horse like this. But, when these horses really start to turn around, they really start to appreciate the work, kind of like getting a dog from the pound, that is really happy to have a nice home. Well, I think horses are the same way when they get in the hands of somebody who really cares about their well-being and isn't just trying to force them into doing things. They become much happier. So even right here, just off at that walk and the trot here, just even the fact that he's trying to stretch is immensely better than what we saw, in the riding video. You can see that he's extremely disconnected between his front and back end. Once again, he's not in rhythm. That is, his front and back end are not moving in sync together, which is what gives him that funny kind of look, like, which way are they actually going? If you look here, how out of sync the legs are. You watch how the front leg is moving before the back leg on the diagonal pairs. Typical of a horse that has head way high, what happens, that's how they get these funny sort of extended trots out of horses, by bracing the neck, holding as hard as they can, pulling the neck over, and then holding it against the shoulders. So that makes the front legs kind of flip out in a phony way that actually does extreme damage to the horses, and one of the biggest reasons we see so many lame dressage horses today. But look how he's already just starting to stretch into this contact, and this is the kind of horse that the Chambon is really meant for. These horses that have just been upside down their whole lives, that have sort of forgotten how to actually travel correctly. So it really helps them. And of course, as you said, with this horse, she was working with a so-called dressage trainer who immediately just broke the horse over in the neck. So this really helps with all of that, because it just lets the horse stretch out and down. Now, I know some of the students, who are working and trying to do this work in places where there are people who don't understand the work, and somehow gotten it in their ideas that a Chambon is somehow a cruel torture device, which nothing could be further from the truth. It's the only device that simply does nothing but let the horse stretch out and forward. All it does is stop the horse from throwing his head way, way up in the air. So it's never used, we never put it on so tight that it ties the horse's head down, because if we do that, it will tend to curl them behind the motion just like anything else, or curl them behind the bit rather. So it has to be set up so it just comes into play about what the horse's is here. So it hits it if it throws its head all the way up. That's all we want to have happen. And then just wait for the horse to come around to stretching into that contact. Now, it can really be helpful to do the work in hand with horses like this, but if you don't have a lot of experience, you can try it and see how far you get. There's a lot of examples of it on our website. There's also a lot of people that you'll see online if you stay connected through the Art to Ride fans and followers. Facebook, you'll see a lot of good work on there, and people explaining things to each other about how to go about these things, and trial and error, That's the wonderful thing about that site. You have a group of people to support you. So if you have a question, you can go on there any time of the night or day, and somebody will answer it before too long, and usually with a very long and very astute answer for you. So that's a wonderful resource for everyone around the world. We can all stop listening to these so-called trainers who do nothing but abuse our horses. Listen to other people who've done it correctly for a while, and you'll get a whole other picture on what riding should and can be. But this is really coming nicely. Obviously, he's stumbling along here a little bit at times, but that's very normal. You're out in a grass pasture, and there's nothing wrong with working horses in grass pastures. it can certainly be done. And if we're working them correctly, they'll be just fine. And you can see that that's the problem with when horses are hollow, they catch their feet on the grass and that kind of stuff and trip and stumble. But as they begin to stretch, and if you want to ride horses cross country, it's very important that they learn to stretch down and see where they're going. I was taught that probably in my first riding lesson at 5 years old, that the horse had to have its head down to be able to see where it's going if you're riding out cross country. Going out for a hack, you've got to let the horse have its head down so it can see what it's stepping into. And you can see how this horse is struggling a little bit, but you're having really good moments when it's coming around. So all you have to do now is just be patient like there. And every time he gives, you give back to him and let him have a little larger circle. That's really coming very nicely. If you can get that much today, it won't be but a few weeks before he'll just come out and stretch down consistently. And of course, the beauty of teaching this work is that it's self-perpetuating. As the more comfortable the horse feels in the work, the more it wants to do and the easier it is to get the work. Which is why we see so many horses that have just shut off these days, because somehow it became popular or even thought of as a correct thing to do, to hold against the horse's mouth and kick like hell and beat them up and try to pull them into a frame. And of course we have our national organizations to blame for this, because they're the ones who are supposed to be watching this kind of thing. And meanwhile, we've watched so many of our horses' sports being dumbed down. And unfortunately, so many horses being ruined because of it, and a lot of riders getting hurt and killed even, as we've had 2 in the last few weeks. So the importance of riding horses over their back, folks, is for your own safety as well as for the preservation of the horse. But even if you care nothing about the horse, care enough about yourself to go, hey, if I ride this horse upside down, I have a good chance of it flipping over on me, or falling in a hole, or whatever the case may be, or just... if a horse is not over its back, it's not really in the aids, and that's kind of the difference between a horse that's really in the aids and just accompanying horses to things. A lot of people will take a horse and tie it up to a post and then just run bags over it and all these kind of things till the horse just stands there. But unfortunately, horses that have that done to them, they pay a certain price in that they the idea of that is you're scaring them to death. In other words, you're scaring them to the point that they finally just give it all up and just hang their heads there and go, okay, well, I'm not scared of anything anymore because I'm ready to die. So that's really not what we want. We want a horse to not spook at things because it trusts us, not because we have just subjected it to tying it down and then, letting it become accustomed to all these various things. Because that's not the same as having a horse actually in the age, which a lot of people sadly find out. This horse is going to be a very good one, though, to watch it develop, as you can see how undeveloped it is now. So these are the kind of cases that are just wonderful to watch, because this horse will literally go from a -5 mover to be a 6 or 7 mover. Once you get it over its back, you'll be amazed. But you can see how thick the underside of this horse's neck is. That shows you that he's really done very little but pull himself along by his shoulders. And once you get an eye for that and you watch this horse going, you can clearly see when it switches from when he all of a sudden propels himself forward through his hindquarters and his back, or when he's doing even there in the walk. You see how kind of the ground's stabbing. He's actually pulling with his shoulders with every step there. And if you watch as the horse stretches down, you'll see how the step in back starts to come through, and then the horse starts to begin to push up through the back. So that's a horse that's propelling it forward. And that's what we want the horse to do. We want it to be a rear engine job, right? We recently read an article here somewhere with this guy. It was in one of the dressage magazines, and one of these nouveau trainers is declaring that that we have to think of these new horses as having 2 engines. They have an engine in the shoulder and an engine in the back. Well, that's completely absurd, because this means that their horse is completely hollow and disconnected. But of course, that's how you get these movements that people are now scoring so high with in dressage, by just like you do a saddlebred. You create a gaited horse by hollowing its back so it no longer can move in the way nature intended, and that's just what people are doing by holding the necks in with all these devices and with their hands and all this kind of thing. We create, gaits that aren't true. Once again, if those diagonal pairs don't move together in the trot and swing absolutely in rhythm, the horse is not over its back. And we see how in the walk here, once again, study that. You can see how the horse literally pulls with its shoulders right there. And see how little movement. The back leg is just kind of moving because it's being pulled forward by the front step. So it just kind of steps up into that kind of very stiff looking back leg movement where it almost looks like every step of the back leg makes is kind of stuck in sand, though it's improving here. And that's the beauty of this. Once you train your eye, you will see when we start talking about movement, you begin to be able to see the horse sinking up from the front to the back, which tells you that the horse is connecting over its top line. Even here, watch how the horse begins to stretch the neck forward. And even for every little bit he stretches forward, you see how the hind leg begins to come a little more forward underneath the horse and starts to actually be involved in the movement of the horse rather than just being drug along. I very much like how you're coming back to the walk here. That's just what you want to do. Now, with extremely hollow horses like this, it is okay to put on side reins. You may want to put on very, very long side reins along with the Chambon. It seems like you see how this horse twists its head from side to side, kind of avoid the contact with the Chambon without the bit, or there's a stretch into it, like he's even doing there in the canter. If you put on some long side reins, it seems to stop them from being able to evade laterally, that is from one side to the other. Which I might suggest with this horse. Just really long. Once again, you're never trying to tie the horse's head down, but they just stabilize the horse from side to side a little bit more so it can't twist its head when it's trying to avoid the contact with the bit, as it often does here. So that can be a little bit helpful. You might want to try that with horses that have been upside down as long as this one. Every little bit helps. And then as soon as you get the horse, now you are getting some moments like that, and you can literally see how the gaits transform even for those few moments that you're getting that. So you're getting it enough here that tells me that it won't be long before you'll be able to get it all the way, because he's already starting to stretch here. So if you'll just be patient and do a few days like this, I think you will get there in no time at all. But if you find it is a bit of a struggle, then I would go ahead and put some long side reins on him, and at the same time with the Chambon, it just kind of helps him straighten out until he gets stretching a little more. Then just take him right off. But once again, if you do that, they should be very long. That is, there's no backwards tension. They should be big loops in them. But this is coming along very good, and I think you can agree with me that when you see him starting to stretch, the difference in how he moves, even those little steps that he takes compared to what we saw in the riding video, where there was not one step that he took that was really anything that was going to help him. So you've done just the right thing here to come back here and come back to the beginning, and that's what you have to do. I mean, look at this horse's back. But just know that you're not stuck with that, people. If you have a sway-backed horse, you can improve that. You can bring them right back into full health. But it's not going to take, it's going to take more than a day is what I'm saying here. It usually takes about a year, actually. So to start with one about like this, I would say probably takes you about a year longer than one that is just starting out without being as upside down as this. So kind of add an X. But I'm talking about, that means 3 years to bring this horse to the level where he could begin collection. So that's a lot saying that. And once again, it doesn't matter whether the horse is 10, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, or 15. If they've never been over the backs, it's going to take about 2 years to build a top line. So it may take you about a year to get this horse consistently over its back. But he's coming around very quickly, compared to if he doesn't have any pain issues already, which you're lucky that he doesn't, because a horse like this is, they all begin to develop kissing spine and all kinds of other problems and leg problems and stuff, because of course they're not working through their shock absorber system. So every step they take, that's why we must go slow with horses like this and not be in a hurry to do a lot of cantering and this sort of thing. We don't want to do anything that the horse is not over its back. So that includes the trots. But you're doing that just right. You're coming back to the walk very soon after just a few minutes of trot, and that's exactly how you want to do it until the horse can stay there consistently. We do not want to come out and do 30 minutes of the horse running around upside down in the trot, which will only just make the horse sore in its legs. So we want to do everything one step at a time, getting as correct as we can. Then we simply try to make the next step, but if we can't quite get there, then we simply come back to the step before it, and that's really the whole this whole classical system in a nutshell. We don't try to force the horse to do anything. If we can't do something, we quickly realize that it's our lack of how we have developed the horse that's not letting it do what it is that we want it to do. And horses have been prepared physically for no matter what it is. It's quite simple for them to do. And that also applies to jumping. When horses have been jumped and been developed correctly, jumping is not a problem and it's safe. Horses that have never been over their backs and they're jumping are always dangerous. You know, even just that's why people have become so obsessive about footing. I mean, so many dressage people today would be horrified to see a horse, you know, be trying to be worked in a grass field like this, because if they rode their upside down horses in a grass field, just like the people who do saddlebreds and these kind of things, you know, they would fall down. One of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life was two people on Tennessee walkers showing up for the opening day of an open hunt, and let's say we saw them for about 2 minutes in the beginning, and we saw them at the end of the day. Now this is coming really nicely here. This is excellent. Now that's looking really good. Now you're really starting to get there. You just keep wanting to move those hindquarters away. One of the biggest, the trick, so to speak here, the technique that we need to evolve is just getting that horse to move its hindquarters away. You can still see on the circle here, he's pulling the shoulders a little outside. So you just want to keep coming back and moving those hindquarters a little more away from you, but now this is coming along beautifully. And you will find that it'll be easier on one side than the other. What you may want to do is start on the side that's easier for the horse. So once again, if it gets there on one side, it's going to be easier on the other side. So go to your easy side first and get the horse really relaxed and swinging, and then go to the more difficult side. But this is such a huge improvement over the last videotape that I saw, the little riding videotape. And now I think we're really on track. And if you'll just wait to ride him again, just wait till he's totally consistent in the stretch. So when he's completely consistent in the stretch in the walk and trot, then you can think about riding him in the walk. And then as he gets stronger, you can think about riding, walk, and trot. But, you know, there's no reason that you can't try things. So if your walk is going good, you simply try to go into the trot. If the horse is strong enough, you'll be able to get the stretch in a few moments. If you can't, you simply come back to the walk and keep working it from there. And one day you'll start the trot, and boom, it'll just be there, and you won't have to struggle. You won't have to fight. It'll just happen for you. And that's the way it should be with horses. If we're struggling and fighting, it's not correct. There's something wrong with what you're doing. You have left out a step someplace, or you simply haven't developed the horse sufficiently to do what it is you're wanting to do. That kind of stuff is no big deal, and that's just what you do. It's just no big deal. If you had little spooks, you just come back and gradually ask him to jump back into the trot again. Never make a big deal. Just go on working. Biggest thing when horses spook is just to ignore it. Do nothing at all. And just go right on back to work like nothing happened. Don't yell at them. Don't make a big deal. You just send them on. It was just a little bump in the road. So really good work here. A huge improvement over the last video that I saw of this horse. And I think you're really on track to getting somewhere with him. You can see how he goes around there, how when the head comes up. Now watch how there's almost no flexion in the hocks and the hips even go higher. So watch as he stretches down and forward, the hind leg starts to swing under, and we see the horse lower behind a little bit even there. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Keep up the great work. I look forward to seeing the next video of this horse. But huge improvement. Well done.